going to talk about a video that I wanted to talk about my mother. But before I get into the conversation, they're severely abusing me, um, shooting me with electronic devices onto my jawline, bones, inside of my face, extreme amounts of pain that I recorded and posted on the internet. And what they're doing is, like, even right now, they just did this. They keep shooting an electronic device into the internal rib cage that I have in my chest. And what they're doing is they're hitting objects against the wall and shuffling them. And what it does is it shuffles, it kind of scrambles the center of my chest. Someone's trying to change the direction of my chest. And it's to rewire me of what love is, what religion is, who God is, who I have sex with, what skin color or the black ethnicity if they want me to get with, and so on, about all the relationships I feel with certain people of what they did. So in order to brainwash me, that's what they're doing, and then severely suppressing me in order to continue the lies for Ken Cooper and the President Barack Obama movement. But I can't do anything about that. You know, the filthy pig of a president and his people are doing this. There's nothing that's ever going to stop those people. But I wanted to talk about that. I highly doubt that my mother, and before I get any situations, I've already removed their religious shrine and the picture of Mother Teresa and the crucifixes, and because I just got a few more months left, and I donated it to went and put them in a box and took it to the donation center. So, but I wanted to talk about something about my mother. That you could, I don't know how much of my mother she can remember anything. I don't highly doubt. I mean, when I talk to her, there's maybe a 10% chance that she remembers any of it. But my mother, you know, before I get into any more about my mother, the highest level of disrespect that my biological mother did not want the president and his military action doing to me and his white supremacy is to have Sarah Cooper and Ken Cooper and that family victimize me. Because Sarah and Ken and Kenneth thought they were doing it to me. And then they were doing a heroic act for my mother. They were very disgusting beyond anything. I couldn't express this enough. That as much as they were victimizing me, and they were doing it to me, they're doing this directly to my mother, because I'm her son. And it's very difficult for me to, it's very painful. It's very emotionally painful, mentally painful, because I know how my mother was, and the president is ordering this for his white supremacists, just like when I went over to AT&T the last few times, and they're literally just staging performances for Kenneth, Sarah, Madison, and especially Ken Cooper, the hero. There's nothing that I can do about that. And they're doing it for racism. It's just pure racism and faggotry. They want to keep their sexuality secret and all this other shit, and the president and his military action is the ones that are doing that. And it's hard because my mother was so innocent, and the President Barack Obama wants to beat the shit out of my mother using the people around her in order to get what the fuck his nigger ass wants. And he doesn't want to see, oh yeah, I know, exactly, it is about race, and it is racism what this motherfucker was doing. But there's absolutely nothing that I can do, and you know, I'll never get another mother again. And he wanted to use that's why Kenneth did what he did, so that he could get his faggots, Julian and his twin, and Marco and his faggot twin, to go ahead and work along with the faggot movement, and then he walks off, and then I get attacked by my own siblings, by these sabotaging. But as I'm trying to talk to you right now, they keep shooting me in my temple, very violently, and it's a gun that they keep just shooting me with. and it's putting me in a lot of pain right now as I'm trying to have this conversation and talk about my mother, about what they're doing to me, but they're just torturing me. But I wanted to make that video about that the highest level of disrespect that my mother would have felt inside of herself was the fact that you were continuing to do this, continuing to put Sarah Cooper in my life and use your faggots and your transgenders to attack me, to glorize Sarah Cooper and Ken Cooper onto me. But you know that you can control your faggots. And then my mother's the desperate one for President Barack Obama's glory and this goddamn trophy that he wants to fucking give me. You know, this piece of shit motherfucker wants to staple Ken Cooper with that trophy and Sarah Cooper, and it's a mastermind. I know exactly what this motherfucker wants. And I know how my mother was. But what memory is there 20 years ago of my mother has? They already gave her the money and they invested of what her future of outcome is going to be in life. And they did. They brainwashed my mother. They said, you shut the fuck up and I gave you the money. You're a stupid bitch, but they don't tell you that. And it's very difficult because as much as they did this to my mother when I didn't understand what was going on, when this whole situation, even before my father's suicide, even after my transplant, after my father's death, it never changes the fact they're hurting my mother. When you send these Ken Cooper's impression to come punk me out and start charging at me at the AT&T store, and you send all these faggots and transgenders, that's all to victimize me for Sarah and Ken Cooper's movement. Because you're outsmarting my stupid bitch mother, biological mother, and that's what you're fucking doing. That's exactly what they're fucking doing. Because I know exactly how my mother was. My mother is not a faggot. My mother's not a transgender. Stop! My mother's not a fucking transgender or a fucking lesbian. Her sister may be a fucking lesbian. My mother is fucking straight. She likes straight men. She wants to have sex with a guy that can get an erection naturally, even if my father couldn't and tried several times. It's very difficult because my mother was being so brutalized and abused. She was continuing to have sex with this guy, Raymond Palomo, who's gay, and couldn't get an erection. And she knew my father was gay, and she has no choice. And Barack Obama and Sarah Cooper and Ken Cooper knew they could put that bitch where and they did. They spent the money for it, and then exchange it with the fucking kids. It's very difficult because they took me out of the picture for that very reason. They knew I was going to win. They blamed it on something else when really the truth was that they wanted to cover up with what they were going to do. That was why. It's so victimizing me that the fact that Kenneth thinks that he's doing this for his mother, he's doing this for my mother, and he's just, all helping. It's all a lie. It's all sabotaging. 100% the highest level disrespect to my mother, because as much as I was pissed off they did it to me, and they did, they're doing this to my mom. My biological mother, they know that my mother wouldn't have liked them being around. Especially how abusive and mentally abusive they would have been toward me. But, like I said, when it comes to the situation with my mother, I don't know what you can remember. It's very traumatizing, very tormenting because I know they're doing that to her. Just like you have this pig that shows up that looks like Ken Cooper, and he starts playing cemetery and taunting my dad's funeral, like he's standing in front of the casket, and he starts talking about my mom's kids, saying he was the one that was making sure that Marco and Julian were taken care of and the kids were coming over and all these different things. This son of a bitch faggot piece of shit Ken Cooper supporter is right over there, him and his fucking pig, and there's nothing that I can do about it. The president is Barack Obama, is this fucking nigger is the one that ordered this shit to happen, and there's no reason other than to justify it. It's white supremacy. It is 100% prejudiced. It is 100%, and it's very difficult. But moving on, there's nothing that I can do. Because they want to think that they're just doing it to me, but they know that they're doing it to my mother, but she doesn't understand. And that's how they torment me. because I do still care, I do very much care for my mother, and I understand my mother better. And, you know, but moving on, there's nothing that I can do about that. The president is ordering that. And, but I wanted to say, I dated this girl. I went to Six Flags with Barry Pan, Barry Pan, Teresa Monzanato, Selena. This girl named Selena, or was it Selena? I don't know if it was Selena or Vanessa. I think it was Vanessa. No, I don't think Selena was. It was Vanessa. This girl named Vanessa, light-skinned, Mexican girl, but real light-skinned. And then Teresa Monzanato was a Mexican girl, and she was like a dark Mexican, Mixteca almost, but she was like a dark Mexican, dark heavy tan. And Barry and me, we went to Six Flags, and my mom gave me like I think $100, and back then. It was more. I think it was more $100, like $120, or it was like $100 or $120. And back then, that was like $500. Like that was a lot of fucking money to give. And she gave me that money to go have a good time at Six Flags because I was bringing girls. And my mom was scoping out like viciously the females. Like I just knew what my mother was. It was crazy to see my mother because. She wanted me to pick a beautiful girl, physically beautiful, and I remember she saw me talking to Teresa, who's more darker, heavy toned, a little bit more darker than like Edward Rangel or Robert Zarate, or much more dark. Like I'd say like as dark, or not a little bit, tiny bit darker than Edward Rangel, who had an identical twin who passed away. But I was talking to Teresa, and we're in the back car, and we're, being kids. I was 12 or 13 years old, something like that. I was like 12 or 13 years old. And we went to Six Flags, had a great time. We left. I was with Barry Pan and this guy named Chance. I don't think I don't know if Vandy went with us. He could have. But anyway, we went there. I think Selena showed up on a separate visit, but she was like half black, half white. Or half Mexican, half black. But I remember being very young, and she saw me talking to Teresa. And my mother talked to a couple of girls, so she was driving the Dodge Intrepid. So I was 13 years old at the time. So I do remember being 13 years because we were in the Dodge Intrepid. My mother had just gotten this car. And we get back home, and I could tell in the car my mother was like so spying, kind of like overprotective of me in the car. Overprotective, like really protective. And it didn't bother me. I wasn't harassed. I was just kind of curious to how my mother was behaving, because I had never had girls around my mother ever in my life that I was like, I either liked or wanted to be friends with, or still learning this, the game of sex and seduction. And you're just a young kid. We're all 13 and 12 years old. And we get back to the house, and the next day or something, my mother tells me, "Oh, ¿cuál le querías, Hector?" And he goes, "Oh, he goes, oh no, he goes, a mí me gusta." I told her I like Teresa. I was like, "Oh, I like Teresa. Vanessa." They were both really pretty, but I don't know if she asked me what I liked, but she told me, "I saw you talking to Teresa. Like, you know which one's real pretty?" Or I was in the car. I was in the car with her, and I think it was on our way back. But I remember being at daylight, so it could have been the next day. But I remember it was possibly during the daylight. It was before the sun went down. And I remember my mother in the car she was the way that she looked at me, and I was in the passenger. He goes, oh, mira this. He goes, ese Teresa, oye, ¿por qué estás con esa muchacha Teresa? Si está muy prieta, no. Vanessa está más blanca, está más bonita. And so she was telling me, she's like, no, Vanessa's prettier for you. She's not pretty. But I really didn't know Vanessa, which Vanessa's very, very much pretty. Because I think I played Spin the Bottle with her when I was just a kid. You know, so long ago. But I remember, I wanted to have this conversation because I remember my mother telling me, she's like, well, okay, ¿por qué estás hablando que se prieta niña? No, I said, Vanessa está más bonita, yeah. And she was like trying to convince me to tell me, yeah, the lighter one, that girl's too dark. I don't like that her for you. And I wanted to talk about that because I remember my mother being very protective, very, very overprotective, and it never bothered me. You know, I actually kind of liked the idea that my mother was protective of me because it felt like my mother valued me a lot. Because the way that she was overprotective of me was she when I say like her body language, her attitude, how she expressed herself was entirely much more intense to make sure that I was going to get a good selection and I wasn't going to be taken advantage of. Another, and you could ask my mother this, but then again, her memory's completely gone, for President Barack Obama. Another incident that you can go and talk to my mother about, or no, not just my mother, but Myra Nava. And I talk about this that I think I got her phone number from high school, and I was in 7th grade, and I talked about that. I've talked about this before. She showed up to my house out of nowhere. I was in 7th grade. And this is, I was in 7th grade. This is about the time my little sister, that little Marissa Miranda girl dies. And I remember my mother, she showed up to my house, Myra Nava. I don't know why her mother dropped her off. She didn't tell me anything, she just showed up to my house. I was totally unsurprised. I opened the door and she was just standing there. So I was in total shock because I was like in my boxers and shit. Nobody told me. Anyway, I let her by surprise because I didn't know what to do. Her mom just took off and left. And she was fully dressed. She wasn't strange. She said she wanted to talk to me or see me. And she's a Mexican girl. She goes inside my room, and I bring her in, and my mother immediately looks at her, and you could tell by looking at her, she goes into like supreme alpha mode. Like, is she pretty enough? Is she pretty enough that I'm gonna give her approval? And my mother knows that I would have told her at that time that any person, girlfriend that was gonna come over, specifically a girl, she knew I would tell her because I wasn't allowed to bring anybody. I mean, she knew how my room was right next to the kitchen, and there's a door away from Frankie's room. But I wanted to say something about this because when that day happened, my mother told me. Like, I went to my room, and like a couple minutes later, my mom finds a reason to knock on my door while she's making food, and this all happens all very in a short period of time. Knock on the door, my mom's cooking, I open the door. I don't even hear this girl knocking on the door. I went to go throw an extra trash away or do something or get the mail, and it was like 8 o'clock at night. And I bring her in, my mom's cooking, she just goes into alpha mode, like, who's this muchachita? It's a muchachita, like, she would say these girls that go on and, they know what they're doing. And my mom, I bring her in her room and I close the door, and I could just sense like my mother doesn't like this at all. Because she's worried that I may have sex with one of these girls and get her pregnant. And I'm still young, she wants to make sure I have choices. And within a couple minutes, my mom knocks on the door. I don't have a doorknob on my door. And she goes, Hector, ven aquí. And I was like, oh shit. And she the way that she talks, she ven aquí, like it was kind of like, oh shit, like I know that this is kind of a nerve-wracking situation because she doesn't talk like that. and I knew it had because she was here, that girl. So I get up, she goes, ven aquí, mira, tira esa basura, tira esa basura. She goes, and so I can tell she wants to investigate. So I grab the trash or whatever debris, and I go up and throw it away, and then I come back to my room, and Myra Nava says something that my mother threatened her or said something to be very aware. And he goes, "Hey, what's wrong with your mom? Your mom told me," she was like, "You better watch it." He goes, "Your mom's kind of freaking me out." She goes, "My mom," and my mother never met this girl, and she goes and says, she says to this girl, he goes, don't try to, he goes, "I know what you're doing, he goes, "I know what you're doing, don't take advantage of my son, and try to get pregnant," or something like that, something along those lines. But she said something very vulgar to her, very sort of very protective, and told her, said, "You better watch it with my son." And I want to say those are her exact words, but she said, "You better watch it con mi hijo." And she said, "You better watch it con mi hijo, que tú sabes qué está pasando." And she said this to her, and Myra and I was pretty shaken up. But she said this to warn her, and I wanted to talk about this because, I mean, I don't know who this girl Myra Nava went to Turner and Perry. I lost in touch with that person after 7th grade, never heard from him again. And the person moved on, had like 5-7 kids later. But I wanted to say something about this because you can talk to my mother, and you can also talk to Naira Var. What did my mother tell Myra Nava? But you can talk to her to verify what I'm telling you. So I thought I would say that. And we stayed in the room for like an hour. And I think my mother, after about an hour, either my mom knocked on the door and said, "Okay, it's time to go. It's time to go." And my mother was just kind of trying to shoo away this girl because my mother didn't want me to get. My mother knew that there were always muchachitas. She would say in Spanish, "No te pongas son muchachitas que saben," meaning there's a lot of young girls who start having sex very young and they'll get pregnant, and they're much. My mother has always understood that a lot of girls mature much more faster than young boys, and then they'll take advantage of it, and that's how my mother was. And so I was a prized possession, and that's why she behaved that way. But I wanted to say something about this because the idea that is happening is to say how my mother was, at least part of how she was, to get a sense of maybe a little bit of what she was. Obviously, I can't describe that enough. But I say that because how I was being sold for sex and cornered by friends, and not having any money, and my mother was being prostituted and all these different things because my mother very much cared for me, and they're still trying to prostitute me to their skin color and condition me to it. And it's their military action and the President of the United States that's doing this. With Raquel and their friends giving them money and secure, because they don't give a goddamn fuck about those important things of what my mother wants for my life. I mean, obviously we make our own life, but that's why they got my mother pregnant and bother the house and put the kids over there, because they can brainwash her and play her stupid and she just forget about it. And that's what they wanted, because it helped Miguel and it helps President Barack Obama and his goddamn family. Oh, that was a transgender that was real good for Patricia Cadena. But I remember my mother being overprotective because she was always desiring me to be very, very beautiful, like genetically. Like, she didn't think so much of just personality, it was about genetics. Like, very much so. But I thought I would say something about this because I'm being sold for sex and they're beating the fuck out of me with these electronic devices. And that's how even though I'm 40 years old, I'm 41, and they already infected me and raped me, they know they could kill me, and they know they could do anything they want to me, and they knew they could put my mother under control. for Sarah Cooper to have Raquel and it's connected to Kenneth, that's the most level of I mean, it's very difficult because I know how my mother was, and I couldn't express more. It feels like my mother died. I never thought in my life my mother would have died. I always believed authentically my mother would live a very long time and grow up to be very old, but the Mexican style culture that I grew up with, my mother and the kids that were in our house and my dad, that culture of the Mexican life and the tortillas and so on, all these sort of things that are Mexican family traditions and what we're accustomed to and what we understand of what is U.S. culture and black culture and Asian, that she would just get older like the other older Mexican women. So I'm talking to you, and they keep throbbing my chest and shutting a door and just electrocuting me. But I wanted to make a video on this because I recall that I can't even remember what the fuck I'm telling you, and that's how they're not getting me to tell you anything. I can't even remember what I was going to say. They're just shooting my chest and they're not letting me talk. But it's very. My mother was very, very protective of that, and Barack Obama and his people in this gay faggot movement, they knew they could kill me, and my mother would just go along with it. It's difficult because they think that I'm using in line, but it's his military Marines and his faggots in the Corps, Marines that are possibly, if they are responsible for shooting these electronic devices entirely, it's 100% they're victimizing me. Because they're filled with faggots. That's all it is. That's all. If you talk about a faggot clan, that's all it's in, and they sell the women there. But it's difficult because my mother, they knew they could get rid of me because they paid for the house and they paid for all this other shit, and they used her identical twin to brainwash because they needed a trash can. They needed to be guaranteed a trash can. That's why they had her twin pose as her the entire time, because she was in a desperate situation as well, and I have no idea. She looks just like my mother but a little bit different and is fooling me the entire time, poisoning my mother's character. So who do you blame, President Barack Obama or my mother? And that's exactly why. But stop. I never thought my mother would die. I don't know, I didn't think she'd ever die. I don't know how to explain. I just know the pain of a kid through Robert Girardi, who he lost his mother when he was very young. His mother died when he was, I think, 7 years old, as I remember. And he used to talk about it all the time. And he used to mourn about his mother. And he never had a mother growing up. He knew his mother when he was up until he was 7, and she died. And he was left all by himself. And I remember so I knew Robert Girardi well to understand what it is for someone else not to grow up with their mother that died, and what those interpretations and evolving for so many years like that, and how they talked about what that character, that mother that they had, or what they could remember, and that sort of pain that went along with that. But it's very difficult because I know that my mother, I just didn't think that she would be controlled and would die like that, just manipulated at that level of degree. I couldn't express enough. As fast as I was driving on a highway when I was 28 years old, when I found out that I thought something happened to my mother, she couldn't remember where she was, and I got my car keys and I took off to Garland in a speed chase nearly to make sure my mother was okay. And I thought it was so crazy because I honestly thought my mother was with Lucio, living in that house, and she was being taken care of. Stop! That she's being taken care of at that house, but I knew she wasn't going to be happy. But there was nowhere else that I could do. She knew she had nowhere else to go. And I knew she felt trapped because I had seen the bruises. She said she didn't like Lucio anymore. She was, and not only that, she got raped and she got ran over by a forklift. You know, I heard her being screwed right next door to the room that I was in for like a whole week. And I could hear the bed squeaking, and so could Julian. And he took off like that after that week. I never saw him, he just left. But I wanted to say, you know, something about that because my mother was drugged up and that's how much control he had over her. But I knew that, I guess that was their relationship. He had sex with her. Whatever relationship he had sexually was between him and her. I really can't get involved in that other than when it's violating, obviously. And I felt it was violating whenever she had her leg crushed and I could hear that he was screwing her on the side. And like she just didn't know what the fuck was going on. And it was crazy because when I walked into the room, she was totally lost. She didn't know, she wasn't in touch with the world that she was living in. She seemed totally lost. And it scared me a lot, but I couldn't get near her because of that guy. So I say this because, you know, that was probably the last time I saw my mother. I'm thinking to myself, you know, when was it that I actually, her twin started showing up into the picture? And I think that her twin started showing up in the picture somewhere when I was around 16 to 17 years old. And I think that was whenever my dog died. When my mother said that she came home from work from Stanley Tools, which I thought she was working at, and our dog died and maggots were coming out of him, the way that my mother put that dog in that trash can was horrific. I mean, she had no empathy, like a trash. Like it was fucking trash. And there was a dog we had for 17 years, is suffering death. Julian and me were just looking at her like, this is fucking crazy. This is, you know, our mother's gone crazy. And I didn't know, but I don't think that was my mother. That was my mom's twin. And how you could use her twin to disrespect me and mutilate me and wish me death and horrors like that is another level of disrespect of so personal against what the president is ordering with the psychologist to do that to get away for Sarah and Ken and for his own Medal of Honor bullshit and staple me to what they want. You know, they have so much control over my mother and what they did. It's just, I never thought she would die. I never thought that she could be wiped away like that. And they put the blame on me, and they didn't retaliate against Sarah because they wanted to feel white supremacist cowboy leader detective. Let's feel sorry for the old bitch. And they didn't care. You know, the president is charging at me. What my mother thinks of that, you know, yeah, he's a fucking nigger. That's exactly what my mother would be thinking. I know that's what my mother would. You may give her money and all this goddamn shit, but you attack her own shining knight of a child that she only has, being raped and selling your other kids for sex and getting fucked in her ass and all this other shit, and one kid dies, and then Barack Obama and his goddamn wife are charging at me, and you have your fucking people come and attack me. You know, my mother's not getting breast implants and fucking cares for driving fucking Lamborghinis and see how much Sarah gave love and her fucking transgenders and her faggots and white supremacists are calling me doing all this other shit. She doesn't give a damn about that. But they know exactly how to target her. But she knows that she couldn't do anything, but I don't know how much of what she can remember. Like I said, I know it's she's not fully functional. I know that for a fact because I talked about this before. Julian told me when I was in his apartment, and he didn't want to tell me too much, but he did tell me, and he said, because we just noticed we're at Mom's house and she just started forgetting a lot of things. She started forgetting a lot of simple things in the house. She would go and she started to forget. And let me tell you, for something like that to happen to my mother and Julian to pick up on that and tell me, that means I know that had to been on my biological mother, on my mother's end, it had to be really bad. It wasn't something just simple. Because we knew our mother. Me, Julian, were around our mother and she was cooking and all these different things and activities when we were kids. We knew we were always trying to protect our mother and help her because people were victimizing her. She couldn't speak English, she was uneducated. And we understood that type of growth. So when my mother is now saying that she's walking in this big house, she lives in, because it sounded like the way that Julian told me it sounded like I got this image, or it sounded like he was telling me like she was walking around, he said he was walking around the house and she was forgetting a lot of things. Like she couldn't, whatever, she was going to cook something or utensils or some shit like that. But I know for Julian to tell me that, it had to have been really fucking bad. And he shrugged it off very quickly because he didn't want me to get worried, because it was a tug of war between me and him. If he told me something like that, he knew that or believed that I was wanting to take control or wanted to, what the hell's going on. So then he then wants to control, and then that's why the faggots come after me, because you have your faggot over there in control. Oh, it's not faggots, it's just faggot, and then take off, and then Barack Obama for you niggas. And it becomes racist, and it's just love, and it's horrible. Like it's hard for me to express, but I know for Julian to say something like that, and he shrugged it off very quickly because he saw that I got worried. I said, "What?" And he, "Oh no, she's fine. She just did it a couple of times. I don't know." And like he was just kind of pitching the idea to kind of check me out, and kind of like he seemed to be worried about it. And then that's how Kenneth Cooper takes over for the radio station for his niggas and transgenders. But it's a very it makes me think of Robert Zarate. It makes me think much of Robert Zarate, of how he used to talk with me all the time. He used to go to Wendy's all the time. Always. When I talk about when I used to hang around Robert Zarate and Daniel Box together, and me and Robert Zarate we went there like religiously. We'd go to Wendy's, go to the dollar movies, like 3 days a week, every summer. I mean, this is on a double time on like going with Brian Yockey, Daniel Box, Barry Pan, walking in the movies. It was me, Daniel, and Robert, and it was just me and Robert all the time. Because we were like trying to pick up girls and just, hang out with girls and shit and see what's going on with all the kids from other schools and shit. Because we were very active, more than any of the other kids. And we would always go to Wendy's and or whatever, and we'd always walk together, like 30, not even more than 30, it's like 40-minute walk. It's like 45 minutes. To get to my house and to the dollar movies is like an hour walking easily. To Robert's house to the dollar movies was about 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. And so we had time talking about stuff. Sometimes we'd be smoking weed. And he started talking about it, his family or whatever, how he felt about it. He cared much about his dad, and he cared much how he missed his mother. Or somebody would bring up his mother to Robert Zarate, and they'd be joking around, like, "Hey man, you might want to get home, man. It's late. What your mom's gonna think of you, man? Your mom's gonna miss you, man. Go home, man. Get out of here. You go home. It's late." And he'd be joking around and I could see Robert's expression, how he felt so traumatized because his mother died. And he didn't tell these people this. And then I just remember those types of things being around him. But understanding the mutilation of what this motherfucker did to my mother and how he's excusing it, because it doesn't change the suffering that my life went through. It doesn't change the fact that what he's not punishing them. I'm the one that's being punished. You have the faggot and white supremacist motherfucker right over there. He's not punishing these pigs. What this does to me and how this irritates me, they're just conditioning me, and it's horrible. But it makes me think of, like, you know, because Robert Zarate used to favor my mother, my biological mother. And Robert Zarate Sr. used to talk to my biological mother, and they got along really great. In fact, one of the reason that my mother got me a pager, do you know why? It used to be a pink pager. It was my mother's pager, and my father used to think that she was using it for prostitution. And she got it in secret. She didn't tell me anything about it. And this is like when caller ID first came out. Like when you went to AT&T and they first came out with caller ID, and you used to have to buy, because Robert Zarate, you could talk to Alicia about this. Robert Zarate Sr. was the first person I ever seen buy the AT&T caller ID, and it used to be a little white box with a little text screen on there that's old school, like a 1989 computer screen, like this. Like the screen looked like this. And when somebody would call, you just look at the screen and it says who's calling before you pick up the phone. And I remember Robert had that for like 6 months or some shit, like a year. And I told my mother that, and she was like, "Oh, that's really nice." And she got it for herself. We finally got a caller ID, and she'd be sitting on the phone, and she would just kind of do this on the couch and be like, "Oh, look, is it Robertito?" There it is, Robert. I come see. And so she would call, and they would talk for 45 minutes, an hour. And I stopped shooting me. And Robert Zarate, you know, when I was at his house and my mother and him would talk, my mother favored Robert Jr., Bubba. And, you know, because stop shooting me. I can't finish this conversation. They're shooting me repeatedly and abusing me on my temple. They're doing this because they're trying to abuse the Jesus Christ and satanic fucking bullshit, and that's why they're abusing me, and they're hitting me on my temple because it's an enforcement, and I can't finish this conversation. They're beating the fuck out of me.